Snow fell relentlessly across the forgotten cabin, burying the forest in deadly white. Yet nothing could conceal the horror unfolding on that exposed porch. For little girls no older than 9, trembling and helpless, stood tied together with thick rope, their small bodies bound to wooden posts, their breath fading in the bitter cold. Snow buried their boots. Ice clung to their hair. Their muffled cries vanished into the blizzard. No one was supposed to find them. No one knew they were missing. No one knew they had been kidnapped. No one was coming. At least that's what the traffickers believed. Before we dive into what happens next, here's the thing. My fiancé bet me we can't hit 1,000 subscribers in 1 week with rescue stories like this. He said, "Nobody watches feel-good hero content anymore." Well, lovely people, let's prove him spectacularly wrong. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story of hope travels. Let's show him that good news still matters. Miles away, Officer Grant and his K-9 partner, Blitz, were finishing a grueling shift when the dog suddenly went rigid. Ears locked forward, body tense, staring toward the dark forest as if he sensed something no human could detect. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "Blitz, what is it, boy?" the officer whispered. Grant tried to pull him back, but Blitz lunged, dragging him toward the tree-line, toward an old cabin deep in the woods, one abandoned for years. Officer Grant chased after him, unaware that every second mattered and that what they were about to discover would leave them shaken to their core. And then he saw them. 4 innocent lives stood there in the freezing wind. Their lips are blue. Their fingers are stiff. Time was running out. Grant's heart stopped. "Dear God," he whispered, sprinting forward as Blitz raced ahead. Who tied these girls to die? Why were they abandoned in this storm? And more importantly, were they still alive? The truth behind why those girls were left there was darker than anyone could have imagined. What happened next would shock the entire town. The snowstorm rolled in without mercy. Thick, heavy flakes drifting down like ash from the sky, smothering the world beneath a blanket of bone-chilling white. Officer Grant wiped a layer of frost from his patrol car window and exhaled, watching his breath fog the glass. It had been a long shift, the kind where silence felt heavier than danger itself. The forest road beside him stretched endlessly into darkness, its edges swallowed by drifting snow that threatened to erase the world completely. Blitz sat in the back compartment, unusually rigid. The German shepherd stared through the cage door, as if tracking something invisible, ears rotating with every distant sound that Grant couldn't hear. His muscular body vibrated with tension. Grant glanced back at his partner and chuckled softly, trying to ease the strange atmosphere. "Relax, buddy. We're heading in," he said, tapping the steering wheel as he prepared to shift into drive. But Blitz didn't relax. His amber eyes remained locked on the forest, unblinking, and a low whine escaped his throat. Not playful, not curious, but urgent. The kind of sound that made the hair on Grant's neck stand up. Grant paused, his hand hovering over the gear shift. He'd learned over 4 years together to never ignore Blitz's instincts. The dog had an uncanny ability, a gift really, to sense danger, to detect human distress that no training manual could explain. Once, Blitz had led him to a collapsed hiker 3 miles off-trail in complete darkness. Another time, he'd alerted to a kidnapped teenager hidden in a car trunk during a routine traffic stop. "What is it?" Grant asked, turning fully in his seat to face his partner. "You smell something out there?" Before he could finish the question, Blitz slammed his paws against the cage door with such explosive force that the entire vehicle shook. The lock mechanism, weakened from years of use, gave way with a metallic snap. The compartment door flew open. Blitz burst out and bolted into the snow-covered darkness, disappearing into the tree line within seconds. "Blitz! Heel!" Grant shouted, but his command was swallowed by the howling wind. His partner was already gone. Grant's heart hammered against his ribs. He grabbed his flashlight, radio, and emergency kit, throwing open the door and plunging into the freezing storm. Snow immediately stung his face, his boots sinking deep with every step as he ran after the dark shape racing between the trees ahead. Blitz wouldn't behave like this unless something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. The hunt had begun, and neither of them knew they were racing against death itself. Officer Grant rubbed his tired eyes as snow pelted the windshield in thick, relentless waves. The wipers struggled against the accumulation, scraping back and forth with a rhythmic squeak that had become almost hypnotic over the past hour. It had been a long, uneventful shift, the kind where every minute dragged in silence pressed down like a weight. Time to head home. Time to get out of this storm before the roads became completely impassable. He reached for the gear shift, already imagining the warmth of his apartment, a hot shower, maybe some leftover pizza. But something stopped him. In the back compartment, Blitz, his German Shepherd partner of 4 years, sat unusually tense. His muscular body was rigid, every muscle coiled tight like a spring ready to release. His ears rotated like radar dishes, tracking sounds Grant couldn't hear, movements he couldn't see. "Easy, boy. We're done for the night," Grant said, glancing in the rearview mirror at his partner's reflection. But Blitz didn't relax. If anything, he became more focused. His amber eyes locked onto the dark forest beyond the road, penetrating the veil of falling snow as if he could see through it to something hidden, something wrong. A low whine escaped his throat. Not the playful sound Grant knew so well, not curious or bored, but urgent, desperate even. Grant paused, his hand hovering over the gear shift. A chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. He'd learned over their 4 years together to never, ever ignore Blitz's instincts. The dog had an uncanny ability, something beyond training, beyond explanation, to sense danger, to detect human distress that no human could perceive. It was almost supernatural. Once, Blitz had led him 3 miles off-trail through complete darkness to find a collapsed hiker who would have died from exposure within the hour. Another time, during what seemed like a routine traffic stop, he'd alerted to a kidnapped child hidden in a car trunk, saving a life before anyone even knew the girl was missing. "What is it?" Grant asked, turning fully in his seat to face his partner. "What do you smell out there, boy?" Blitz barked, sharp, demanding, desperate. Not a warning bark or an alert bark, but something Grant had only heard once before during that trunk rescue. A bark that said, "Lives are at stake. Move, now." Grant's pulse quickened. His instincts, honed by years of police work, kicked into overdrive. "You smell something? Someone." Before he could finish the question, before he could even unbuckle his seatbelt, Blitz slammed his paws against the cage door with such explosive force that the entire vehicle shook. The lock mechanism, weakened from years of use and never properly repaired, gave way with a sharp metallic snap. The compartment door flew open. Blitz burst out like a missile launched from a silo, hitting the snow-covered ground at full sprint. Within 3 seconds, he was at the tree line. Within 5, He disappeared completely into the swirling darkness, swallowed by the storm and the forest. "Blitz! Heel!" Grant shouted, throwing open his door and leaping out into the freezing wind. "Blitz, wait!" But his partner was already gone, racing into the unknown with singular purpose. Grant grabbed his flashlight, radio, and emergency kit from the front seat, his hands moving on autopilot. His heart hammered against his ribs as he ran toward the trees, his boots sinking deep into fresh snow with every desperate step. The beam of his flashlight cut weak circles through the blizzard, barely illuminating 5 feet ahead. Somewhere in that darkness, Blitz was running toward something, or someone, and Grant knew with absolute certainty. Blitz wouldn't behave like this unless something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. The hunt had begun. Grant pushed through knee-deep snow, his flashlight beam cutting weak, desperate circles through the blizzard. Wind howled through the trees like something alive and angry, drowning out all sound except his labored breathing and the rhythmic crunch of boots breaking through ice-crusted drifts. "Blitz!" he called into the storm, his voice barely carrying beyond a few feet. "Wait!" But Blitz didn't slow. Through the swirling white chaos, Grant could see his partner moving with singular, terrifying purpose. Nose low, body driving forward like a locomotive that had locked onto an invisible track. Whatever Blitz sensed out here, it was pulling him forward with unstoppable urgency. Grant pressed the radio clipped to his shoulder, fighting to keep his frozen fingers steady. "Dispatch Unit 19. My K-9 has detected something in Sector 12, following into Forest Zone. Possible emergency situation." Static crackled back, broken and garbled. "Unit? Weather? Can't." Then nothing. The signal died completely. Grant cursed under his breath, his heart sinking. The storm was killing all communication. No backup, no support. He was completely alone out here with whatever Blitz had found. Then he saw them, and his blood turned to ice. Footprints. Small ones. Tiny ones. His stomach dropped like a stone. Grant dropped to one knee, brushing snow away with his glove, his hands trembling. Not from cold, but from dawning horror. For distinct sets of small footprints, all heading deeper into the forest. The prints were erratic, overlapping, chaotic, showing unmistakable signs of stumbling and dragging. One set had smeared edges, as if a child had fallen and been yanked back to their feet. "Dear God," Grant whispered into the wind. "Kids out here? In this?" From somewhere ahead, Blitz's bark cut through the storm. Frantic, desperate, demanding. Grant rose and followed, his dread growing with every step. The tracks told a story he didn't want to read. There were also larger boot prints, adult-sized, flanking the small ones on both sides. The children hadn't wandered out here on their own. They'd been led here, or worse, forced. Then he saw it. Fresh blood spotted on a broken branch, still bright red, not yet frozen solid. Grant's hand instinctively moved to his weapon. Blitz's barking grew more intense, echoing through the skeletal trees like an alarm bell that wouldn't stop. Grant broke into a run, stumbling over hidden roots buried beneath the snow, white powder spraying around him with each lunging step. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he pushed harder. Then, through the white curtain of falling snow, a dark shape emerged from the storm like a ghost materializing from fog. A cabin, old and weathered, barely visible against the swirling blizzard, its outline threatening to disappear completely. And there, at the base of the porch, stood Blitz, hackles raised, teeth bared. body rigid with protective fury, staring at something Grant couldn't yet see. But he was about to. Grant approached slowly, every sense screaming danger. The cabin materialized through the snow like a ghost. Ancient rotting wood, sagging roof threatening collapse, windows shattered and black as empty eye sockets. It looked like it hadn't seen human life in decades, a forgotten relic swallowed by the forest. But the footprints led directly to it. Blitz paced frantically at the base of the porch steps, whining and growling in alternating bursts, looking back at Grant with desperate eyes that seemed to plead, "Hurry! Please, hurry!" Grant climbed the creaking steps, each board groaning under his weight like a dying breath. His flashlight swept across the weathered porch, and his stomach twisted. Rope fibers clung to the wooden support posts. Fresh rope, the kind that hadn't been exposed to weather, still holding color and texture. His heart hammered against his ribs. Then he saw it. A dark smear along the porch boards. Blood, still wet, glistening in his flashlight beam, not yet frozen solid. "Police! If anyone's here, identify yourself." His voice cut through the storm's roar. Silence. Only the howling wind answered, whistling through the broken cabin like a dying scream. Blitz suddenly lunged forward, slamming his paws against the front door, barking with such explosive fury that Grant jumped. The dog's entire body vibrated with urgency, clawing at the wood as if trying to tear through it. Grant reached for the door handle, weapon drawn, every muscle coiled. It was unlocked. He pushed the door open, the hinges wailing like something in agony. Darkness swallowed the threshold, thick, suffocating, unnatural darkness that seemed to resist his flashlight. And then he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the storm's endless roar. A child's whimper. Weak, terrified, dying. Grant's blood turned to ice water in his veins. "I'm coming!" he shouted, rushing inside, Blitz exploding past him. The cabin interior was a frozen tomb. Pitch black, bone-chilling cold, abandoned furniture scattered like corpses. His flashlight beam cut frantic circles through the darkness, sweeping across debris, broken glass, overturned chairs, and, oh God, oh dear God, through an open doorway leading to the back porch, he saw them. For little girls standing tied together with thick rope, their small bodies bound to porch support beams like sacrifices left for the storm. Snow had accumulated around their legs up to their knees. Ice crystals clung to their hair like crowns of death. Their faces were blue-tinged, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes barely open. Vacant, fading, slipping away. They were dying right in front of him. No, no, no! Grant sprinted forward, his flashlight clattering to the floor as Blitz raced ahead, barking frantically. The girls' heads lifted weakly at the sound, moving as if their necks could barely support the weight. The oldest, maybe 9 years old, looked at Grant with eyes that held only the faintest flicker of fading hope. "Help!" she whispered, the single word barely more than breath. Grant holstered his weapon and dropped to his knees beside them, his hands already working frantically at the rope. "I've got you. You're safe now. Hold on. Just hold on." His fingers shook violently as he clawed at the bindings. They were tied with brutal tightness, cutting deep into the girl's wrists, leaving angry red grooves that seeped blood. Whoever did this had meant for them to suffer. Blitz pressed his warm body against the smallest girl, whining softly, desperately trying to share his heat with her frozen form. Grant grabbed his radio with trembling hands. "Dispatch! Emergency! I have 4 minors, severe hypothermia, abandoned cabin in Sector 12. Need immediate medical response. Static hissed back. Empty, meaningless noise. Dispatch. Do you copy? His voice cracked with desperation. Nothing. Only static and the storm's endless howl. Grant looked at the girls. Their shallow, rattling breathing, their bodies trembling with the last remnants of life trying to hold on. He had minutes, maybe less. We're on our own. Quick pause. If Officer Grant and Blitz aren't giving up on those girls, then we're not giving up on reaching 1K subs this week. My fiancé's laughing at me right now saying it's impossible. Prove him wrong. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, share it with someone who loves hero stories, and comment where you're watching from. Let's flood his phone with notifications. Grant worked frantically, his fingers numb from cold and adrenaline coursing through his veins. The rope fibers were frozen stiff, cutting into his hands as he tore at the knots binding the first girl's wrists. The moment her arms came free, she collapsed into him like a rag doll. She weighed almost nothing, her body limp, ice cold, barely responsive. Stay with me, Grant pleaded, his voice cracking as he lowered her gently to the snow-dusted porch floor. He stripped off his heavy police jacket, wrapping it around her small frame and pulling the second girl close beside her. Blitz moved instantly between them, lying across their legs, pressing his warm fur against their frozen skin. His body heat was immediate, desperate. Good boy, Blitz. Keep them warm, Grant commanded, though his partner already knew what to do. He turned to the third girl, sawing through her bindings with shaking hands. Her eyes rolled back the instant he freed her, her head lolling to one side. Her breathing was dangerously shallow. Each inhale rattled in her chest like broken glass scraping against bone. Come on, sweetheart. Don't give up on me. Grant rubbed her arms, trying to force blood back into frozen limbs. The fourth girl, the smallest, maybe 7 years old, hung completely limp from her bindings. Her lips were blue as twilight, her tiny fingers curled inward, frozen stiff as claws. When Grant cut her loose, she collapsed forward, and he caught her, cradling her fragile body against his chest. Her skin felt like touching death itself. Stay awake. Can you hear me? You're going to be okay. He rubbed her arms vigorously, desperately trying to force circulation, to pull her back from the edge. Her eyelids fluttered weakly. Her mouth moved, forming words with no sound behind them. Grant leaned close, his ear near her cracked lips. What is it, sweetheart? They're coming back. His blood turned to ice. The oldest girl, wrapped in his jacket, nodded weakly, her terrified eyes meeting his. They said, "No one would find us." Grant's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He looked at Blitz. You hear that, boy? We're not alone. Blitz's ears snapped forward instantly, his entire body tensing like coiled steel. A low, rumbling growl vibrated in his chest, the warning of a predator protecting his pack. Then Grant heard it, the crunch of boots in snow. Slow, deliberate footsteps approaching the cabin from the darkness. Multiple sets. He positioned himself between the girls and the door, his hand moving to his weapon. Stay behind me, he whispered to the children. The footsteps grew closer, circling. 2 distinct patterns, 2 people moving with purpose. Blitz's growl deepened, his lips pulling back to reveal teeth. His hackles rose like quills. Through the cabin's broken window, A shadow moved against the falling snow. Then another on the opposite side, flanking them. They were being surrounded. A voice called out from the darkness, rough and mocking, dripping with cruel confidence. "You shouldn't have followed those tracks, officer." Grant's finger hovered over the trigger, his heart hammering. "You have 3 seconds to step into the light with your hands up. This is your only warning." Laughter echoed through the storm. Cold, empty, inhuman. Then the window exploded inward in a shower of glass and wood. Glass exploded inward like a bomb detonating, shards spinning through the frozen air in deadly arcs. The first attacker came through the window in a blur of dark clothing and malice, a masked figure launching himself at Grant before the officer could even raise his weapon. They collided with brutal force, Grant's back slamming into the cabin wall so hard the rotting wood cracked. His gun flew from his grip, skittering across the floor and disappearing into shadow. The attacker's hands wrapped around his throat, squeezing, cutting off air. "Blitz! Attack!" Grant choked out the command. The German Shepherd exploded into motion like a missile launched from hell itself. 80 pounds of muscle and fury crashed into the attacker, jaws clamping onto his forearm with bone-crushing force. The man's scream tore through the cabin, raw, primal, terrified. He thrashed violently, trying desperately to shake Blitz off, but the dog held on with relentless determination, growling with savage intensity. Grant gasped for air, scrambling across the floor toward his fallen weapon. His fingers had just brushed the grip when the cabin door exploded open with a thunderous crash. The second attacker burst inside, a metal pipe raised high like an executioner's blade. Grant rolled. The pipe came down with devastating force, smashing into the floorboards exactly where his skull had been a heartbeat before. Wood splintered upward in razor-sharp fragments that cut his face. He drove his shoulder into the man's midsection with everything he had, lifting him off his feet and slamming him backward into the doorframe. The impact knocked the wind from both of them. The pipe clattered to the floor, and Grant snatched it up, spinning to face his opponent with the weapon raised. Behind them, Blitz had the first man completely pinned, teeth locked on his forearm, blood seeping through the fabric. The man had stopped fighting, whimpering in pain and terror. The second attacker lunged again, desperate now. Grant blocked the pipe, metal ringing against bone as the impact sent violent vibrations up his arms. They grappled in savage silence, crashing through broken furniture, sending debris flying, neither willing to give ground. From somewhere behind the chaos, a small, weak voice cried out, "Don't hurt them! Please don't hurt them!" The oldest girl, barely conscious, was pleading for their lives. White-hot rage flooded through Grant's veins like molten steel. These monsters had tied children to death in the freezing cold. They deserved no mercy. He swung the pipe with every ounce of strength left in his body. It connected with the attacker's jaw with a sickening crack that echoed through the cabin. The man's head snapped sideways, his body going limp as he crumpled to the floor, groaning, dazed and broken. Grant planted his boot firmly on the man's chest. "Don't move." The first attacker, still pinned beneath Blitz's iron grip, had finally stopped struggling. "Call him off. Please call him off." "Blitz, hold," Grant commanded, his voice cold as winter itself. The dog maintained his grip but stopped biting, though his warning growl continued, a promise of what would happen if the man moved even an inch. Grant grabbed his radio with shaking hands, praying desperately for a signal. "Dispatch Unit 19. The officer needs assistance." Suspects in custody. For minors in critical condition. Static crackled. Then a broken voice replied, Unit. Responding. Coordinates. Sector 12. Abandoned cabin. East side. Grant shouted into the radio. Copy. En route. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Faint at first, but growing steadily louder, cutting through the storm like salvation itself. Grant turned to the girls huddled together on the floor, watching him with wide, terrified eyes that had seen too much darkness. You're safe now, he said gently, his voice breaking. Promise. No one's going to hurt you again. Blitz padded over to them, his protective instincts overwhelming. The smallest girl reached out with trembling fingers, touching his warm fur. Warm doggy, she whispered, the faintest smile touching her blue lips. The two kidnappers sat slumped against the cabin wall, hands zip-tied behind their backs, both bloodied and defeated. One had a split lip that leaked crimson down his chin. The other cradled his arm where Blitz's teeth had found their mark. Blitz stood guard between them and the girls, his body coiled tight as a spring, eyes never leaving the subdued threats. His message was clear. Try something, please. Grant knelt beside the children, his hands moving quickly but gently, checking pulses at their wrists, pressing fingers against their necks to feel the weak flutter of life struggling to hold on. Their breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. Their skin felt like touching ice sculptures. All four were dangerously hypothermic, their core temperatures plummeting toward the point of no return. He wrapped them tighter in his jacket, then stripped off his thermal shirt despite the freezing air biting into his own skin. Anything that could provide warmth. He rubbed their arms and legs vigorously, trying desperately to stimulate circulation, to pull blood back into frozen limbs. Stay awake, all of you. Keep your eyes on me, he commanded, his voice firm but gentle. The oldest girl's eyes focused on him with agonizing slowness. Are you real? Grant's throat tightened until he could barely speak. I'm real, and so is help. Listen. Do you hear those sirens? Through the storm's howl, a faint wailing echoed, growing louder, closer, more real with every passing second. Blue and red lights flickered through the trees like salvation bleeding through darkness. Vehicle doors slammed. Voices shouted orders through the wind. Over here! Grant bellowed toward the approaching lights. 4 victims. Critical hypothermia. Officers emerged from the storm like ghosts materializing, bundled in heavy gear, carrying medical equipment that looked like answered prayers. Relief washed over Grant with such intensity his knees nearly buckled. Sergeant Martinez burst onto the porch, her eyes widening in horror. Oh my God! How long have they been exposed? I don't know. At least an hour, maybe more. She immediately began unpacking chemical warmers, emergency blankets, and portable heating units. Other officers swarmed around them, working with practiced efficiency born from training they'd prayed they'd never need to use. Officer Davis knelt beside the smallest girl, wrapping her in a foil thermal blanket. Hey, sweetheart, my name's Officer Davis. We're going to warm you up, okay? The girl nodded weakly, her eyes drifting to Blitz. Doggy saved us. Davis smiled through the tears, threatening to break free. He sure did. Grant stood on shaking legs, adrenaline crashing through his system. He pointed to the subdued suspects. These 2 are the kidnappers. They left these girls to die, then came back to eliminate the evidence. Martinez's expression hardened to stone. We'll handle them. Her gaze shifted to Grant's arm. You need medical attention, you're bleeding. He glanced down. Blood soaked his sleeve where glass had opened skin during the fight. He hadn't even felt it. I'm fine. Take care of the girls first. An officer approached with a stretcher. We can't get the ambulances through the drifts. We'll have to carry them out. Grant nodded. Then let's move. Every second counts. One by one, officers lifted the girls with heartbreaking gentleness, wrapping them in layers of blankets, cradling them like the precious cargo they were. Blitz followed, never more than a few feet away, his protective instincts unwavering even now. The oldest girl reached out as she was carried past. Grant took her small, frozen hand. You came for us? She whispered. Grant's voice cracked. Always. All right, while Grant and Blitz are fighting for those kids, I need you to fight for this channel. My fiancé literally said, Babe, storytelling channels don't blow up in a week. Challenge accepted. If this story touched your heart, hit like, subscribe, share with your family, and tell me in the comments. What country are you in? Let's prove that powerful stories like this deserve to go viral. The journey back through the forest was brutal. Snow fell harder now, as if the storm had been waiting to unleash its full fury. Wind screamed through the trees like something possessed, bending ancient pines and sending ice crystals slashing through the air like tiny blades. Visibility dropped to mere feet, just ghostly shapes moving through white chaos. Officers formed a human chain, passing equipment hand to hand, supporting each other through waist-deep drifts that threatened to swallow them whole. Every step forward felt like 3 steps back as the snow fought to reclaim the ground they'd gained. Grant carried the smallest girl himself, cradling her against his chest, wrapping his arms tight around her fragile form. He used his body as a shield against the wind, bending forward to protect her from the worst of the storm's assault. Her tiny frame felt weightless, terrifyingly fragile. Blitz walked beside him, never more than inches away, occasionally pressing his warm body against Grant's leg as if offering strength, as if saying, I'm here. We're doing this together. Almost there, sweetheart, Grant murmured into the girl's snow-dusted hair. Stay with me, just a little longer. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused and glassy. Cold. I know, baby. I know. His voice cracked. We're getting you somewhere warm. Just hold on. Please hold on. Behind them, other officers carried the remaining 3 girls, their bodies wrapped in layers of emergency blankets that whipped violently in the wind. 2 more officers hauled the handcuffed suspects, who stumbled and cursed through the drifts, their complaints lost to the storm. Martinez's voice cut through the howling wind. Vehicles are just ahead. Keep moving. Don't stop. Through the white curtain of falling snow, headlights appeared like beacons of salvation. 3 patrol cars and 1 rescue unit, parked as close as the impossible drifts allowed, engines running, exhaust billowing into the frozen air. EMTs rushed forward, arms full of supplies. More blankets, heated fluid bags, oxygen masks ready. They worked with desperate efficiency inside the vehicles, heaters blasting at maximum, turning the interiors into life-saving chambers of warmth. Core temps are critically low, one EMT reported grimly, checking readings. We need to get them to the hospital now. Martinez's face was grim behind the snow coating her features. Roads are blocked. Highway patrol is clearing a path, but it'll be another 10 minutes. They might not have 10 minutes, the EMT replied, his voice tight with urgency. Grant looked at the girls now bundled in the back of the rescue unit. Their breathing was still shallow, rattling. Their skin remained deathly pale despite the blankets. "Drive anyway," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Use the patrol cars to push through the drifts. We'll clear the road ourselves if we have to." Martinez met his eyes and nodded once. "Do it." Engines roared to life. Vehicles formed a convoy, the lead car pushing through accumulated snow like an icebreaker cutting through Arctic ice. Metal groaned. Tires spun and caught. Inch by brutal inch, they moved forward. Grant climbed into the rescue unit with Blitz and the girls, pulling the door shut against the storm. The youngest girl's hand emerged from beneath the blankets, fingers trembling as they found Blitz's fur. She held on weakly, as if his warmth was the only thing tethering her to life, the only proof that she wasn't slipping into frozen darkness. "Good boy," Grant whispered, stroking Blitz's head with his free hand. "You found them. You saved them." Blitz looked up at him with those intelligent amber eyes that seemed to understand everything, then gently licked the girl's small hand. The convoy lurched forward, fighting the storm, racing against time itself. The hospital doors exploded open with a blast of cold air and chaos. Medical staff swarmed like a precision strike team as the girls were rushed inside on gurneys, wheels rattling across polished floors. Doctors shouted orders that echoed through the bright, sterile corridors. Machines beeped urgent warnings. Heated four lines were prepped with military efficiency. "Room 3. Get the warming units ready. I need stats on all four: core temp, heart rate, oxygen saturation. Move, move, move." Grant stood frozen in the hallway, a statue carved from exhaustion and dread. Snow and blood covered his uniform. His jacket was gone, left wrapped around dying children in a frozen cabin. Through the glass window of the emergency room, he watched doctors swarm around the four small bodies, their hands moving with desperate speed. Blitz sat beside him, equally exhausted but still alert, his ears tracking every sound, every movement beyond the glass. A nurse approached, her expression gentle with concern. "Officer, you should get that arm looked at." Grant glanced down at his sleeve. Blood had soaked through, dark and wet. He hadn't even felt the pain. "Later." The nurse nodded, understanding written across her face, and walked away without pressing further. Minutes crawled by like hours. Each second felt like an eternity stretched on a rack. Grant's heart hammered against his ribs. His hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. Then, finally, a doctor emerged through the double doors, pulling off her surgical mask. Her face was tired, but her eyes held something Grant desperately needed to see. "They're responding," she said, and Grant felt his knees nearly buckle. "We got them in time. Core temperatures are rising slowly. They're going to make it." Grant exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, the sound shaking from his chest. "Thank God. They're fighters," the doctor continued, a small smile touching her lips. "And they're asking about the dog." Despite his exhaustion, Grant smiled. "He can visit? I think it would help." Before Grant could respond, Detective Harris arrived, snow still dusting his coat like powder. His expression was granite. "Grant, we need to talk." They moved to a private waiting area. Harris pulled out a notepad, his jaw tight. "We interrogated the suspects." "It's bad, Grant. Really bad." "Tell me." Harris took a breath. "They're part of an international trafficking ring. They target vulnerable children, runaways, kids from broken homes. These 4 girls? They were taken because they matched a specific order from a buyer overseas. Grant's hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms. They were supposed to transport the girls to a drop point tonight, Harris continued, his voice barely controlled. But the storm hit. Their vehicle got stuck miles from the rendezvous. They panicked, couldn't make the meeting, so they decided to eliminate the evidence. They tied them to that porch to freeze to death. Yes, no witnesses, no bodies that could be traced back to them quickly. The storm would cover everything. Grant's voice dropped to ice. And they came back to make sure the girls died. Harris nodded grimly. They didn't expect you and Blitz. Grant looked through the window at the girls, now wrapped in warm blankets, color slowly returning to their faces like dawn breaking after endless night. How many others? He asked quietly. We don't know yet, but this investigation just became federal. FBI is taking over. What you did tonight, you didn't just save 4 lives. You exposed an entire network. Grant knelt beside Blitz, wrapping an arm around his partner's strong shoulders. He exposed it. I just followed. Harris smiled faintly. Either way, you're both heroes. Soft morning light filtered through the hospital windows, painting the sterile white walls in shades of gold and amber. The storm had finally broken overnight, leaving behind a world transformed. Pristine white snow blanketing everything in peaceful silence, as if the earth itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. Grant sat slumped in a chair beside the girls' recovery room, Blitz curled at his feet. Both had been there all night, refusing to leave even when nurses offered them somewhere more comfortable to rest. Grant's eyes were heavy, his body aching, but every time he tried to close them, he'd seen those 4 small faces hanging in the darkness, and sleep became impossible. A nurse gently shook his shoulder. Officer Grant? They're waking up. Fatigue vanished instantly. He stood, his heart suddenly racing. Inside the room, 4 small faces turned toward him. Color had returned to their cheeks. Real color, warm and alive. Blankets were piled high around them. Warm 4 fluids dripped steadily from bags hanging beside each bed. The oldest girl smiled weakly. You stayed. Of course I stayed. Grant approached her bedside, his throat tight. How are you feeling? Warm, she whispered, and tears filled her eyes. For the first time, I feel warm. The second girl sat up slightly, looking around. Where's the dog? Grant gestured toward the door, and Blitz padded into the room. All 4 girls' faces lit up like stars suddenly igniting. Blitz! The youngest one called out, reaching with both arms. Blitz approached slowly, gently, as if he instinctively knew they were still fragile. He moved to each bed, letting them touch his fur, nuzzling their small hands, licking away the tears that slid down their faces. He found us? The third girl said softly, her fingers buried in his fur. We were so scared. And then we heard him barking. He wouldn't stop, the oldest added, her voice trembling. Even when we couldn't call for help anymore, he knew we were there. Grant's throat tightened until he could barely breathe. He's got a special gift. He senses when someone needs help. The youngest girl wrapped her fingers deep in Blitz's fur, holding on as if afraid to let go. He's our angel. A doctor entered, reviewing charts with a satisfied expression. Girls, you're doing remarkably well. Your temperatures are back to normal. You'll need to stay a few more days for observation, but you're going to be just fine. The oldest girl hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. What about... What about those men? They're in custody, Grant said firmly, kneeling so he was at her level. And they're never going to hurt anyone again. I promise you that. Relief washed over their faces like dawn breaking. Over the following days, Grant and Blitz visited every single day. The girls grew stronger, laughed more, began to trust again. They drew pictures of Blitz with crayons, 4 artistic interpretations of their hero dog, which the nurses taped to the walls. They asked him to lie beside their beds while they slept, and he did, patient and protective. On the day of their discharge, the 4 girls stood together in the hospital lobby, holding hands, wearing new clothes donated by the community, bright colors that seemed to announce their survival to the world. The oldest girl approached Grant. "Will we see you again?" "Anytime you want," Grant said. "Blitz and I aren't going anywhere." She hugged him tightly. Then she knelt beside Blitz, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Thank you," she whispered into his fur. "You saved us." Blitz's tail wagged slowly, his warm eyes gentle and understanding. As Grant watched the girls leave with their social workers, heading toward foster families, therapy, healing, and new beginnings, he felt Blitz lean against his leg. He knelt beside his partner, taking the dog's face gently in his hands. "You knew," Grant said softly, "before any of us. You felt their fear, their pain, and you didn't stop until they were safe." Blitz licked his hand. Grant stood, looking out the hospital window at the bright winter morning, at the world reborn in white. "Some heroes wear badges," he murmured, "and some have 4 legs and the biggest heart I've ever known." So here's the final score. 4 girls saved, 2 criminals caught, 1 incredible dog, and 1 fiancé who owes me an apology when we hit 1,000 subscribers this week. Lovely people, if this story moved you, restored your faith in humanity, or made you hug your own dog a little tighter, subscribe, like, share, and comment your location below. Let's prove that stories of hope, heroism, and humanity still win. See you in the next rescue story.